Healing is the resolution. Love is the language. Healing starts with a choice to stand for unity, for compassion, for change. Across our community, every sector is stepping forward. Individuals, faith leaders, educators and educational institutions, athletes, government officials, business leaders, health professionals, law enforcement and fire service, each taking the pledge in their own way, yet united by one purpose. Because when we all choose healing, our community moves, our city breathes, and hope comes alive. Join the movement. Take the pledge at www.the411live.org. Print your pledge. Take a picture holding the I Took the Pledge and post it on your social media page with the hashtag the411live. Hashtag I dare you to heal. Now, I dare you to heal.
The 411 Live.
Where you can learn about issues that impact us every day. State of world, 411 Live.
Real people, real talk.
Made to help people in our community in every way. Boy, your girl, 411 Live.
Nearly 100 years ago, racism wasn't just spoken, it was written. Written into property deeds, written into zoning, written into who could live where, written into who could build wealth and who was shut out before they even got the chance to try. You want to know why Milwaukee County is so segregated? Stick around. Hello, I'm Beverly Taylor, and this is the 411 Live. Real people, real talk. We've brought our guests back from an earlier episode. So this is part 2. We're talking about their monumental project, and it's called Mapping Racism and Resistance in Milwaukee County. We have 2 outstanding University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee professors, Dr. Ann Bonds and Dr. Derek Handley. Welcome back to you.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Okay.
Yes.
So we had the other episode, and there was so much, more that wanted to talk about. So thank you for agreeing to do part 2. Let's start at the introductory part for people who are hearing this podcast for the first time, didn't hear the first one, and they're not, they don't know about the whole covenant thing in deeds. Give us a kind of that elementary, that 101 level of covenants.
Yes. Racial covenants were clauses that were inserted into property records that defined who could live, occupy, or rent a property. And so these racially restrictive covenants were inserted along with other kinds of restrictions that you might see that would be attached to a home at the point of sale. Restrictions on building style or what they are called setbacks, how far a house is set back from the street, building height. But there within those restrictions, in the early part of the 20th century, it was perfectly legal to insert language that said no one other than the white race can live, occupy, or rent such property. And oftentimes there were clauses that were also included with this that would say people of color could occupy the property if they were employed as domestic servants by the owners of said property. So you can see the racism that is so clearly exposed in that language, those legal clauses that really defined who could be in certain places and who couldn't be in certain places. And they were legal. They were enforceable up until 1948, and they weren't made illegal from including in property records until 1968 with the passage of the Fair Housing Act.
Wow. So in 1948, when they were not legal,
Yes.
but they could still be included,
Yes.
did people still kind of honor them? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I think they
Because
really...
why include them?
Well, So it was still legal, but not enforceable.
They were legal and not enforceable.
Right.
My apologies. So you could still include the language, but yeah, they weren't legally backed by the courts. So prior to 1948, a neighbor could say, hey, there are these restrictive covenants, and this black family moved in next door, so they're breaking a covenant. They could sue, and they would have legal recourse to do so and would be successful because that is how the court of law would respond. By 1948, the Supreme Court ruled, and this was after, I should just note here, that the NAACP had been bringing cases against these. From the very beginning, these were being contested in court by the NAACP throughout the 20s and the 30s. And so this 1948 case was a culmination of all that activism and the legal challenges being brought forth by the NAACP. And so essentially the Supreme Court said that they're no longer enforceable. They didn't say that you couldn't include them. And so, in fact, we see in Milwaukee, there's not a lot of them, but there are restrictive covenants that continue to be filed after that year of 1948.
Yeah.
And so I think the way that, now Derek can weigh in, but we've interpreted a lot of that is that they have, they carry a lot of symbolic power in addition to their legal power. I mean, a neighborhood is, a subdivision is putting these in their records to say whites only. And so, that really communicates a message to potential home buyers from the outset, even if they, couldn't necessarily.
Deterrent.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So covenants are not, it's not something that is unusual. I mean, there were covenants in other places across the country. But does Milwaukee just kind of stand out in its prevalence of covenants, the amount or what's included in that?
Well, this work is being done in different places. Just one comparison, we have more covenants than in Minneapolis. I think St. Louis may have more than Milwaukee. But one of the things that we've noticed is take Minneapolis, our covenants occur a lot earlier in the 20s and 30s. Also, the language may read differently depending on what part of the country. Folks are doing this work on the West Coast. You see a lot of covenants that was restricting people of Chinese descent or Japanese descent. What's very interesting for Milwaukee is how the language for Black people change over time. We've seen references to Negroes, colored people, African descent, even Ethiopian. So this language referencing Black people changes, and it might even change from whoever's writing the covenant as well. So there are some unique things, I think, to Milwaukee. But every city are seeing something similar.
Right. In doing this work, were there any surprises for you when you looked at it and you were like, "Man, I didn't see that coming"?
I guess given the history of Milwaukee, kind of thinking about the racial geography and patterns of segregation, I thought that there might be more racial covenants on the south side of Milwaukee. And so for me, that was a little bit of a surprise. It's not to suggest that that people were not trying to exclude people of color from the South Side or that people weren't racist, because of course we know that that's not the case. But I think what we know is that these were working class areas of Milwaukee. They were immigrant communities, as we discussed in part one of our conversation, that this category of white was somewhat in flux, and there were immigrant groups that were also seen as, putting this in air quotes, undesirable. And so we see that kind of play out. But I thought that there might be more. But we see very clear patterns, kind of on the, outside of the city limits of Milwaukee and the surrounding suburbs, but then especially kind of in the northern and northwest side of the city.
Yeah.
And I would add, I think, two big surprises for me. Number one, sometimes the houses didn't have covenants, but the street, the neighborhood, the community would create one. It's called a petition covenant. And so, folks in a particular block, they will all sign this piece of paper, and they'll have this language that you cannot sell your house to a black person. So these petition covenants was like, and the other big surprise was cemeteries.
Yes.
Cemeteries were excluding black people. So seeing that was like, wow, even in death.
In death,
Yes. Yes.
Right? Racism, Jim Crow, cradle to the grave, and
Yeah.
that's literally
Yes.
playing out here.
I think there were a lot of cemetery covenants in Milwaukee compared to what we've heard from some of our colleagues in other cities. So I think that is kind of a unique thing. But the cemeteries were, yes, very surprising.
Yeah, yeah. So what is the ramifications of, and we talked a little bit about this in part one, the ramifications for having these covenants and excluding people in the way, and way that they did. And I know one of the key is the wealth gap, right? And you can talk a little bit more about that, and what else. But with the wealth gap, man, it's hard to catch up. It's almost impossible for many people.
Right.
One of the things that we see that we haven't really talked about yet is the timing of the racial covenants, that they often had time frames attached to them. Sometimes they would be designed to just carry on forward indefinitely. We saw we saw one that was set to expire in 2022 or something along those lines. So it was 100 years. But the most common time frame that we would see would be like 25, 30 years, maybe 50 years. And so in some instances, when you see that, this is a generation. It's designed to be a generation, to keep a neighborhood white for at least a generation moving forward. And so when you think about this, they were set to last long enough, to enable that neighborhood to stay white through the next generation. It speaks to, I think, the way that these operated to exclude people of color from the benefits and from the well-resourced neighborhoods that had schools and parks and the kinds of things that we think about where we might want to raise our kids. But yes, this idea that they were actually designed with that in mind is another one of the features that I think speaks to, their intention.
Right, right. One of the things that we didn't talk about in the part one was the map resistance. And I know that there was strong map resistance too, right?
Well, the resistance to the covenants.
To the covenants,
yes.
right. Right, exactly.
Right. Well, that was an important part of this project, and I think this is one of the features that separated our project from other cities. It's one thing to know about the racism and map the racism, but we have to show that it wasn't a surprise to the Black community. And from the very beginning, I learned, and I'm not from Milwaukee, that the Columbia Savings and Loans Association was founded in 1926. 24, thank you. Partly in response to housing discrimination. So this is in the 1920s. And Ann mentioned earlier about the NAACP. We had the local chapters of the NAACP as well as a local chapter of the Urban League that were fighting against housing discrimination from the very beginning. So this is something that the Black community knew about. They knew where they were not permitted to live or restricted from living. So we want to highlight that. We want to show, we want to create maps to represent those stories as well. In the first episode, I talked about Zadie Heiler, who was the first person to buy a property in Wauwatosa. Well, him and his brothers, they had to defend his land with shotguns as they were building their house. This is in 1955. This is in 1955 because when he started to build, it was being vandalized. So these are the stories we want to tell alongside of these covenants, and that the resistance and the struggle, and it was multiracial, was alive and active as this housing discrimination was going on.
So it's very important to not only show the harm, but show the
Yes.
resilience and the resistance.
Yes.
The resistance and the communicating that not everyone felt the same. And this is what I tell my students sometimes. I say, regardless of your background, you weren't there. You shouldn't feel sorry for anything. You should identify with those who are fighting for right, who was practicing social justice.
No matter what color.
Yes.
Because there were people of all colors.
Yeah.
Zeddy Howler in Wauwatosa had white neighbors who were supporting him. He had a white friend buy the land for him and sell it to him. So identify with Zeddy and Zeddy's friend, and not with those who are writing the covenants. So this is part of our history. It's not divisive. It's something that we can learn from and to draw positive things for those people who are trying to do right.
I love that. I love that. You know, we're going to take a quick break right here and come back and talk a little bit more about these covenants and what we can draw from the research that you've done. Listen, you're listening to the 411 Live, Real People, Real Talk. We'll be right back.
People couldn't see my potential, so I had to show them.
I've run this place for 20 years, but I still need to prove that I'm more than what you see on paper.
Today, I'm the CEO of my own company.
It's the way my mind works. I have a very mechanical brain.
Why are we not rethinking this?
I am more.
I'm more
than who I am on paper.
My roommate Taylor lost her mom and just a few weeks later went through a really bad breakup. She felt hopeless. She kept a gun for protection. And I just couldn't let something preventable happen. I pressed pause. I filed a firearm restraining order to temporarily remove the gun. It wasn't easy for Taylor, but she got the help she needed. Learn more at illinois.gov/pause to heal.
Welcome back to the 411 Live. My guests, Dr. Ann Bonds and Dr. Derek Handley, with talking about their groundbreaking project, mapping racism and resistance in Milwaukee County. We've covered a lot, and we were talking about resistance, and somebody else popped in your head.
Yes.
So tell me who that is.
Well, many of us around here know about the name Bernice Lindsay. We hear that name as someone who was so important for the Social Development Commission. We think of the MIAC Center, the Center for Performing Arts, that Bernice Lindsay was a part of establishing. But she was also a housing advocate, too. She worked very, very hard for veterans housing. And she and her husband, Ulysses, and a group of activists from the NAACP, found out about some new development. You know, just think about the early part of the 20th century. It's the 20s and into the 30s. The Great Depression halted a lot. It caused a lot of chaos in the building industry. So there was a subdivision that had been subdivided. The land had been platted, we call it, but the housing hadn't been built yet. And that land did have restrictive covenants, but the Lindsays and some of their allies were able to acquire land that was in tax arrears in the 40s and purchase that directly from the city. And then they went ahead and built houses in this area. And, you know, there were reactions to the white residents. They tried to push them out, but once again, a multiracial alliance came forward and said, no, we're staying. And so we can look at the records of the NAACP and see many folks that were actually living in that area, including the Lindsays themselves who lived. This is up by, I'm going to remember the old name of Custer Stadium, which I know is no longer the name of the stadium, but it's just if folks want to know, it's right around that area of the high school up there. So that is a kind of important subdivision when we think of the history of the struggle for housing.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm looking at the dynamic duo. You know, you guys come from different areas. I think you're English.
I'm in the English department.
English,
yes.
and you're geography.
Yes.
So, you know, they're different. How does that work to, delve out different parts of the project and complement each other? How did that work?
Well, so I am in the English department, as you stated. And my research specialty is African American rhetoric, and to a lesser degree, African American literature. And when I first heard about the project, because Ann had started working a little bit, working on it before I got to UWM. I've been at UWM going on 6 years.
Okay.
6 years now. I wrote a book, Struggle for the City, and where I was talking about Black communities, what rhetorical strategies Black communities were using to resist urban renewal in the 50s and 60s. So my focus were Black community struggles. And so when I heard about the project and I reached out, I said, the mapping, the racism part is just half. We got to tell the whole story. And I wasn't even thinking, like I said, I'm not from Milwaukee, and I know a lot now about Milwaukee from the 20s up and through the 60s. And so that's what I was bringing to the project, as well as, analyzing the language and the language use. Ann and I co-wrote an article about the legalese and what are the effect of making it seem so normal because of the legal speak in which you see it in the document. And of course, and I'm going to let Ann speak to it, she has the spatial, I learned words like scales and scalar and things like that. So we work hand in hand together. I'll let Ann speak to her.
Well, I am interested. I've always been interested in cities and urban inequality and racial segregation and really just understanding it, all of the things that we've talked about, how it came to be, how we can understand it, how we can do something different. And I became very interested in racial covenants through teaching a course that I teach, the Geography of Race, where we look really intensely at racial segregation. And I really believe that there are times when maps can tell a story. And this is something of a geography where you can see something and it's an image that contains so much in it. So that sometimes being able to visualize, to actually have a sense of patterns by looking at a picture, by seeing them depicted on a map, it helps us understand. As we were talking in the first episode, being able to look at a neighborhood or being able to see the city as a whole and, just be able to see where these racial covenants are, it tells a story. And so I was very interested in being able to kind of have something that is tangible that people could look at and engage with as a tool to think about patterns of segregation. So that's kind of how I came to this project. And yes, meeting Derek was really wonderful because the project was only half of the story at the time, really just trying to understand the covenants themselves. But, Derek and I had a really wonderful conversation the first time we met, and he's, how are Black people responding and how are people trying to push back? And I said, well, there were these court cases, but, I don't know the full story. And, it really awakened me to the idea that, it's just part of the story if we only tell the story of the covenants. The other part of the story is understanding how Milwaukeeans were circumventing them or looking to challenge them or trying to get lending to break beyond the kind of color line that was being established and enforced. Because that's the history, too. And if we don't tell that story, then it's just not an accurate picture.
Right. Break down again what people will find when they look at the map.
Yeah, if they look at the map, it might look intimidating at first. You just let it play through its time scale. It's going to show you basically it's going to look like a time scale, and you hit play. And this is just so you can see the period of time when the racial covenants. So over time, the map will populate with the racial covenants, and they'll appear on the map as red. So just kind of you see them spread across the city. And you can zoom in on the map as close as you want, just like, the maps on our phones. You can, except you use a mouse if you're on a computer. If you're on your phone, you can use your fingers. You can zoom into neighborhoods and you can click on where the racial covenants are. You can read the language of the covenants. So this would really give people the idea that they can see, what their neighborhood looked like, or maybe they live somewhere else now, but they grew up elsewhere in the city, and to be able to look back and it might give people an insight in thinking about the history of the places where they live or where they have lived, and some idea of how it came to be the way it is.
Yeah. Do you get reaction from people who have done it and they see something really surprising?
Absolutely. And but we also receive a few emails from folks that, our community had a covenant as well, and they'll share their information. So we're constantly updating the map as well. But the surprising, yes, and I've already seen people use it for other things, to make other arguments for affordable housing or things like that. So we have gotten a large bit of community response, and from folks who suspected that their house had covenants, and now to have it verified.
Yeah.
Your hope, and I guess some of that is your hope that people will use it for different things. But, the grand scheme, what do you hope happens with this?
I think our goal with this project is just to educate the community and encourage engagement with the community with these ideas of understanding our history and our racial history, and really confronting the racism that was very, very obvious. It was embedded in all of these documents. It was, in some ways embedded in our neighborhoods and communities because of the way that these were produced. And so we hope that people will see this and understand more about the place that we live, and about, really the deep and entrenched patterns of racial segregation that we're all familiar with hearing about in Milwaukee. So this is just a part of the picture, and understanding one of the ways and one of the mechanisms that functioned to divide our city along the lines of race and class.
Yeah. And the reverberations of all of that. It continues.
Absolutely. And we, through our website, we're encouraging people to share their stories with us, because, every family probably has a story. And at some point, we would like to capture these stories and share them to make it part of the project. So on our website, folks can reach out to us and contact us, because there's a lot more. And with this project, there are so many things that can be researched or questions to be asked that Ann and I can't do all of it. So hopefully it's a resource for not just community groups, politicians, other academics who are writing about Milwaukee. They have this resource to help them with that.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yes.
I love that. For folks who are listening, what do you want to leave them with?
Well, one of the things that we talk about a lot is that this project is, and never has been, about really me and Derek. We've been doing this work together with members of the community, and it never could have happened if it was just the two of us. We started this project with 4.9 million digitized images of property records. And we were able to, search those records to look for racial language and whittle it down to a smaller number. But if it weren't for the work of volunteers to really look through these records and identify the racial covenants and to do the work that we did, there's no way we could have done this as two people and been able to identify 32,506 racial covenants. And so I guess we want to, we've been trying to thank as many people as possible, and to really encourage everybody to see this as our project, our work together, and that this is really just a starting point, that we want to learn more, as Derek said, about, how families navigated this, how they encountered it. And so thank you would be one of the things I would like to leave everybody with. Thank you to everybody who participated and made this work possible.
Yeah.
And if I could add to the thanks, we mentioned in the first episode that we lost the NEH grant, but we still had support from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. We've received donations from the community to help. We've received technical support from Mapping Prejudice out of Minneapolis, who've done this project, this type of project before us. So there are so many people to thank when we first began. Our community partners. I think it'd be remiss if I didn't say Reggie Jackson, who was with us at the beginning. So Gosh, now I'm going to start naming names. Mr. Claiborne Benson. So there's been so many folks who've helped and donated their time. The team that we had, our graduate students. So, but the bottom line, this is a community engaged project. This belongs to Milwaukee.
Very good. We're out of time, but if somebody wants to find that map, the best way to do it is...
We do have a website. It doesn't roll off the tongue very easily, so I'm just going to encourage everybody to type Mapping Racism and Resistance in their Google bar or their search bar, and we will come right up, and our website, and we'd love to hear from you.
And if they want to donate, they can find that on that website?
Yes, they can.
Absolutely. That is wonderful. Thank you guys for joining me for 2 parts.
Thank you for having us.
Great conversation.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate the work that you're doing. So as you go on and you get more on this resistance end, you have to come back.
We'd love to be
Okay.
here.
All
Yeah,
right.
thanks for having us.
Sure thing. Dr. Ann Bonds and Dr. Derek Handley, they are the researchers for Mapping Racism and Resistance in Milwaukee County, a very, very phenomenal project. Thank you for joining us for another episode. Remember, we're a nonprofit. If you'd like to partner with us, go to our website, the411live.org. Until next time, I'm Beverly Taylor. This is the 411 Live. Real people, real talk. If you would like to check out past episodes, there are many ways. Go to your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram. Like and watch us on Facebook. Watch and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have suggestions for future episodes, go to our website, the411live.org.